So this is called, instead of talking about what I do, I'm going to talk about how I came to do what I'm doing, which is, I like to think it's kind of an interesting story. So that's why this is called The Long and Winding Road to Green Economy Law. And our story starts, well, actually, before our story starts, let me just say who I am for anybody who doesn't know. My name is Marc Goldgrub. I'm a lawyer at Green Economy Law Professional Corporation, which is a corporate and commercial law firm for the new green economy. I'm licensed to practice law in New York and Ontario. You can learn more about the firm and what I do at greeneconomylaw.com, and you can email me if need be at mj@greeneconomylaw.com. So now our story starts in 2006. This is me at 16, 2006. I was in a band called the Fancy Claps. This is me playing in the Fancy Claps. I think this was Third Floor Riley's, which we used to be on Yonge, north of Dundas. We played a lot of shows there. In 2006, we were named one of the top 25 best bands on MySpace by Rolling Stone. At that time, that was a big deal. Now MySpace is a joke, but at the time, MySpace was not a joke. People actually cared about MySpace, and that was a big deal at the time. So this was also the year that I became vegetarian for environmental reasons. I was already an environmentalist. I've cared a lot about the environment ever since I was a kid. I was just kind of environmentally inclined, I would say. Learned about it in school, and just it was something that kind of naturally appealed to me in terms of being concerned about it. But the environment was less important to me than music. It was not a big thing in my life. It was something that I cared about, but it wasn't like something I was working on in any kind of way. After I graduated from high school in 2008, I went to King's, the University of King's College in Halifax, and I did the foundation year program there, which is kind of a 101 on Western civilization program. Great program. But Halifax was a little small for me, so I returned to Toronto in 2009, and I transferred to the University of Toronto, where I was an English specialist, kind of like an English double major. And I also ran a music blog and started promoting concerts. I had been promoting concerts when I was a teenager in bands. I would set up concerts to play with my friends because some of the options we had in terms of playing concerts were not great. So we were able to do it ourselves. And I think we did some fun stuff. And I got a little more serious about promoting it, not just for me, but for other bands when I was in university, and kind of built a little business around that. It was good times. Here are a couple of pictures. They're not the greatest pictures because I didn't want anybody's faces to be too obvious, since nobody kind of consented to being in this. So it's mostly backs of heads, but you can get a sense of how it was. This is me. I don't know if I'm preparing for a show or cleaning up after a show. This was Tiger Bar. This is the basement of the Crown and Tiger on College near Bathurst. And that was kind of my headquarters. I didn't only promote shows there, but I promoted shows mostly there, and it came to be associated with me and my concert promotion at that time. Big left turn. Okay, I graduated from U of T in 2012, and 2 months later, I was on a plane to Tel Aviv to join the IDF. How did I go from promoting music to joining the IDF? Well, I'm Jewish. All my grandparents were in the Holocaust. I have family in Israel, and when I was a kid, I went to Israel for births, for weddings, but between when I was 10 and 20, I didn't go. And when I was around 20 years old, I said, it's time for me to go back. I haven't been in a long time. And I went and did a summer program at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I was studying Kabbalah and the Arab-Israeli conflict. And I was living in Jerusalem, and I would take a bus to see my family in Tel Aviv very often. And on the bus, there were a lot of soldiers, and they were all my age. And it struck me that it was kind of luck of the draw that after the war, my grandparents ended up on one side in Argentina, and on the other side in the United States. Everybody ended up in Canada eventually. But my grandfather specifically wanted to go to Israel, and their wives kind of messed up that plan. But I very well could have been one of those soldiers on the bus. And when I was in my fourth year of university, I was thinking about going to law school. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But I I was also thinking about going and serving in the IDF, in the Israeli Defense Forces. I felt it wasn't right that the other soldiers who were basically very much similar to me in many ways in terms of background, that they had to serve and I didn't. This was also the time of this was the height of the conflict between Iran and Israel. It looked like there could be a war at basically any day. And I thought, if I go to law school and I'm just like studying law and working whatever, and there's a war, what am I going to do? What am I going to do if they drop a bomb on Tel Aviv? I'm just going to go to work the next day, just going to go to school the next day. And it didn't sit right with me. And I was worried that if I went to law school from university and didn't go to the IDF, I would always regret not going. I would always feel like I didn't do what I was supposed to do. So I thought about it for a very long time, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go. I could do a year and a half as a foreign volunteer. And I thought, if I do that, I'm never going to regret not doing it. And that's what I did. So I went to Tel Aviv. It took me 2 months to go through all paperwork and bureaucracy to get into the army. And I ended up serving in the Nachal Infantry Brigade, Unit 932. That's a combat unit. So that's me sleeping. I think that's me sleeping in a tower in Hebron, a guard tower. That's like stairs. That's not like a sleeping place. That's like a stairway. This is also me in Hebron. I think this is also in Hebron, just messing around in the mess hall. This is in the Golan Heights by the Syrian border. This is a cannon that we would have to carry. And it was so big that it had to be disassembled, and 4 people would carry different parts of it. And we would carry it down the mountains and do like kind of guard duty, sort of guard, not exactly guard duty, but it was sort of guard duty along the Syrian border. This was the Syrian civil war was going on then, and we could see it happening. We saw towns bombing each other, and we were watching out for people crossing the Israeli border, specifically anybody transporting any kind of weapons or anything between Lebanon and Syria, because the kind of way that it is, you can kind of cross Israeli territory to go kind of quicker through some places between Lebanon and Syria. And this is me. I think this is also in the Golan Heights, again, just kind of messing around. You got a bunch of like 19, 20, 21-year-old guys cooped up together in this crazy situation. There's a lot of messing around that goes on. After completing my military service, I went on a 2-month road trip across the US. This is me in San Francisco. That's me in Asheville, North Carolina. This is me in Nashville, Tennessee, in front of Third Man Records, Jack White's record store. And then I moved to New York for law school in the fall of 2014. I went to Cardozo Law. This is the view. This was my view when I first moved into my apartment in Brooklyn. I soon lost this view when they built that building you can see them working on. And Williamsburg does not look like that anymore. It looks a lot more, there's a lot more tall buildings now. When I went to law school, I originally planned to become an entertainment lawyer. I actually was planning, originally when I was in University of Toronto, I was planning to go from my English degree to an MBA. And one day I was promoting concerts, and I promoted concerts with a company called Embrace, which is still around. And I went to the CFO one day, and the CFO asked me what I wanted to do after university. I said, I'm planning to get an MBA. The CFO said, MBA is not bad, but you should get a law degree. Get a law degree, become a lawyer, come back to this business, and you'll be a shark. You'll kill it. And I thought about that. I talked to people about what was better, an MBA or law degree. And everybody basically told me a law degree was better. And I also thought it kind of made more sense to go from reading books as an English major or English specialist really to reading cases in law school. Made a little bit more sense than doing the more kind of math oriented stuff in an MBA program. So I said, okay, I'm going to become a lawyer. Originally, the plan was to work in entertainment, but when I got out of the Israeli army, I had a very different perspective. The idea of going from these kind of life or death situations on the Syrian border in the West Bank to writing contracts for musicians and actors for the rest of my life, it didn't really seem as appealing. And I like I said, I cared about the environment for a long time. I went vegan when I was 21, so I was a vegan in the Israeli army. When people always ask me about that, I say, if you're going to choose an army to be vegan in, the Israeli army is a pretty good one because they care a lot about dietary restriction because of kashrut, kosherness. So I thought about doing something with the environment. Environmental law is the obvious thing, but you're limited in some ways with environmental law. You can go work for a nonprofit or government, but the pay's not great. And I'm not necessarily crazy about the working environments in those places because there's no profit motive. You have people who kind of just keep their head down and try not to stir anything up instead of really trying to get things done. I'm not saying that about everybody. I work with nonprofits and a lot of them do great work and they're phenomenal, but that definitely is a culture that exists in some places. And if you go and work at a corporate law firm doing environmental law, you could end up on, the wrong side of environmental law. So I came up with this idea of maybe starting a law firm that works with green businesses, working with businesses like Tesla, Beyond Meat. I thought these guys were doing such interesting things. If I could do something with law involving them, that would be a great thing to do. And that's how I came up with this idea of doing basically what I'm doing now. And when I was in law school, I took courses like corporate taxation, corporate finance. I took those courses specifically thinking about working with businesses in the future. In 2016, I was in my third year of law school in New York, and I was terrified of Trump getting elected. Really, really terrified. At first, it seemed like a joke, but then I realized, at some point, I realized that it was not a joke. And as we got closer to the election, I spent more and more time volunteering with the Hillary campaign. I started off doing about 1 hour a week, and then it moved to 2 hours a week. And by the time we got to October 2016, if I wasn't in law school or working my internship, I was volunteering. And this picture you're seeing here is me at the Brooklyn Hillary volunteering headquarters. And I'm trying to help these two young girls work the phone banking system on the computers that they provided. This was actually, even though the election itself was kind of catastrophic, this was how I dealt with my anxiety. And it was an inspiring thing to work with so many people. We had so many people. There are 4 rooms of whatever you see in this picture. There are 4 rooms, large rooms of people doing this. And we had young people, old people who were like old and they didn't know how to use computers had shown up and wanted to help. And it was actually a very inspiring atmosphere. It had a great kind of spirit to it. This is a bus of people. I led 2 buses to Philadelphia to knock on doors. New York's a blue state. We weren't really worried about getting people to vote for Hillary in New York because we knew she was going to win it. Pennsylvania is a swing state. So we would load up people on buses and go to Pennsylvania and knock on doors and try and convince people to vote for Hillary. And they were having trouble finding people to lead these buses. And I said, whatever you need me to do, I'll do. And so I ended up leading this bus. I don't remember which day this was. I went once before the election and I went once on election day. I actually had a presentation in an environmental law and policy class or environmental leadership and policy class. And I told my professor, I can't do a presentation about environmental leadership and policy when environmental policy, like real environmental policy, hangs so much in the balance today. I have to go and I have to knock on doors. My professor was understanding. Of course, that election did not work out the way we wanted it to. Trump's victory marked a very definitive end of one chapter of my life. It literally, the next day in New York, it felt like the apocalypse. This picture you're seeing here is, I think that's from the next night after the election. And the streets were filled with thousands, like really up and down New York, thousands and thousands of people in the street, not happy. I'm moderating my language here. Really, it was a pretty crazy situation. And I remember they have the Fox News building actually in New York. And I remember passing it and there was a readout or whatever. It's like the big red letters and lights. And it said something like, Republicans capture the House, Republicans capture the Senate, presidency. It was like, we got nothing. They're just going to reverse everything like good in the world. It was crazy. It was a really crazy situation. There were protests every single day in New York for, I'd say, at least 2 weeks. The first week for sure. I remember being in class in law school, and just there were protests outside. Just, oh, another protest. It's just another protest. Just protests like everywhere. It was a crazy time. There's some pictures from protests. I went to a lot of protests. So I had a lot of anxiety to deal with. I'd been dealing with before the election by volunteering with the Hillary campaign. After the election, New York was like the center of the resistance. There were like around every corner, there were meetings going on. There were protests being planned, political action being planned. It was an unbelievable scene of political organization. It's something I'd never seen, and it did wear off. People were saying, "Oh, isn't this amazing?" I said, "Well, people are doing it now. It's like the gym after New Year's. People are not going to stick with it." But a lot of people got into it at that point. It was also an amazing environment. And I started volunteering with Citizens Climate Lobby in January 2017. I was also working with other groups, but I ended up kind of doing more with Citizens Climate Lobby because I thought they were a little more professional. I liked their goal. The main kind of goal of Citizens Climate Lobby is to advocate for a climate fee and dividend, which is basically a carbon tax where the money is returned to citizens, which is what we have it's very similar to what we have in Canada with the federal backstop carbon pricing program. So when the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act got passed in Canada, and we saw that the backstop looked a lot like carbon fee and dividend in Citizens Climate Lobby, we were very happy about it. It's a very strictly nonpartisan organization. Talk to conservatives, talk to Republicans, and I really liked the work they were doing, so I ended up doing a lot of work with them. I was leading the Brooklyn chapter. This is a picture of me with some volunteers, and the other person whose face is not blacked out is I believe he's a state senator in Brooklyn. I forget his name, but we met with him to talk about a New York State carbon tax bill. This is me and some other volunteers. We met with another state senator. Unfortunately, I think we forgot to take a picture with the state senator, but we were like, okay, let's just take a picture outside the building so we have a document that we came and did this. So that's what this picture is. That was a lot of the rest of my third year of law school. After that, when I finished law school, I took the New York bar exam, I passed, and I worked at an entertainment law firm for a little less than a year. Why did I work in an entertainment law firm when I wanted to do stuff around green businesses? It was actually for visa reasons. I had some visa issues, and I had to basically take a job to stay in the US, and I had an opportunity at an entertainment law firm. I took it, and I worked there for a little less than a year. It was actually a great experience. But I moved back to Toronto in 2018. I was not happy with the political situation in the US, and I thought, I don't need to be here. I could be in Canada. We got healthcare. We got better laws. I'm going to go back. I don't need this. I don't need to worry about, crossing borders and stuff. When I came back to Canada, I very quickly began working with Citizens Climate Lobby's Toronto chapter. I think I'm the one taking the picture here, which is why I'm not in it. This is a picture with Chris Glover, who's my MPP. The other person whose face is not blacked out is Lynn Adamson. She's a very well-known climate activist in Toronto. The other person is my friend Liz, who joined, but I didn't ask her if she wanted to be in this. I had to make this kind of quickly, so I didn't put her face in this. I also started working with a group called Bells on Bloor, which is now sort of morphed into the Toronto Community Bikeways Coalition. This is a picture from a night when we went and gave lumps of coal to people who parked in the bike lane. It's kind of a little fun activist activity. And when I moved back from New York had a great bike lane system and Toronto did not. And I said, I'm gonna get to work on Toronto's bike lane system. This is not a tolerable situation. So I very quickly was able to find Bells on Bloor and start working with them. And I still work with those people now as the Toronto Community Bikeways Coalition. We've done a lot of great work. We got bike lanes now on University. We got them coming on Young. Didn't happen by itself, guys. Okay. After completing a GPLLM degree, it's a Global Professional Master of Laws degree at the University of Toronto, and working as a law clerk for a year, I passed the Ontario bar exam and was licensed in January 2020. I started Green Economy Law Professional Corporation in February 2020. I had actually been talking to some firms really more kind of networking, trying to find a job at a firm. But every firm, every lawyer I spoke to at a large firm in Toronto said, if we hire you, I was really interested in doing work on renewables, clean energy. And they said, if we hire you, you'll do maybe 5% of work on renewables and 95% general corporate and commercial work with whoever comes through the door. And also we're going to pay you like a first year. And I thought, I'm 2 years out from my passing the New York bar and working at a prestigious law firm in New York. I'm licensed in New York, I'm licensed in Ontario, and I have a JD and a master's of law degree. I'm not going to be paid like a first year. So I said, forget it. I'm starting my own firm. I'm not starting from the bottom of the ladder again. And that's how Green Economy Law started. Since then, I worked with a lot of great green businesses and nonprofits, and also people in the environmental green business scene in Toronto and other places in Ontario also. I also started psychedeliclaw.ca. I expanded the firm's area of focus to also include people in health and psychedelics. I think is a growing industry in Canada, not just in Canada, but especially Canada. So I came up with this idea. I said, does anybody own psychedeliclaw.ca? Nobody did. I bought it, built this website, tried to explain everything about Canadian psychedelic law, and I update it with changes as the law changes. I also started lawonmars.com, which is about space law, which I'm very interested in. I don't practice it. It's maybe a little bit above my pay grade, but I just think it's such an interesting area of law and activity. And I thought it would be fun to start a website about it too. So there's also Law on Mars. In addition to my work with clients in the green economy, now some in psychedelics, I sometimes do pro bono work with people in dealing with landlord-tenant issues. It's partly because I'm trying to make the law firm good. I'm looking to get B Corp status. I want to do a lot of good things in the community, and also I want to gain experience with litigation, which in law school, I didn't want to have anything to do with litigation, but now I realize actually it would be good to know how to do litigation. So helping tenants with their issues, sometimes I'll end up in the landlord-tenant board arguing in front of board members, and that's litigation. That's or at least good practice for litigation. This is a note from somebody I helped out saying, thanks for all your help. Please enjoy these vegan baked goods. I said, the services are pro bono. They asked if they could give me anything, if they could give me some baked goods. I said, I'm not going to say I want baked goods or I'll take baked goods, but if you deliver baked goods to me, I'm not going to reject it. I'm not going to turn it away. So they were very nice, and they gave me some vegan treats from Bunners, and they wrote me this very nice note. And I do a lot of presentations, usually not about myself, usually about environmental law and policy and stuff in that area. And I noticed through my activism work with Citizens Climate Lobby that a lot of people had a really hard time understanding Canadian carbon pricing. It is complicated. So I thought, okay, I'll put together a course that explains it. So I have a course called Understanding Canadian Carbon Pricing. You can find it on my website. In the resources section, there's a section called webinar courses. You can find it there if you're interested. The first lesson you can find it on YouTube. It's free. The rest of the course you have to pay for unless you are a green economy law client, in which case all the courses are free for you. And well, this is the only course I have now, but I will be making more courses on other subjects, and they'll be free for green economy law clients. And this course, Understanding Canadian Carbon Pricing, is also free for youth climate activists who are 22 and under. I want them to understand carbon pricing so that they can be more effective in their activism. And that's all. That's my whole spiel. I think it was a little long, but hopefully it was entertaining. And if you're interested in what I do, you can check out greeneconomylaw.com, learn more. And you can always contact me. Like I said, you can contact me through the website or mg@greeneconomylaw.com. All right, that's all for today.